All right, hello everyone. Welcome. And thank you for joining the Power of a Teacher event featuring Dr. John B. King Jr. This is our sixth event of our new Inspire, Amplify, and Prepare series. We're excited to be hosting Dr. John B. King Jr. for an inspiring conversation about his new book, Teacher by Teacher, The People Who Change Our Lives. This time together will be both celebrating teachers and serving as a call to action for aspiring educators to join the profession that makes all professions possible. My name is Proudy Bailey, and I serve as a regional partnership manager who would teach specifically in New York. I'm excited to be an opener for this event and to provide some details about Dr. King. But first and foremost, some logistics for us. Please utilize the Zoom chat box to share any comments and to build community. If you'd like to enable closed captioning, please click live transcript. If you have any questions, thoughts, reactions, reflections throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the Zoom Q&A feature so that it can share it with us. And we really encourage you to stay until the ending of the event and to fill out our feedback survey that will be available after the event. Submitting the survey will enter you into an opportunity to win Dr. King's ebook for free. We're only giving away a total of 50 copies, so just make sure you're there to claim yours. You can go on to the next slide. So our mission at Teach is to end the national teacher shortage, and to serve as a recruiting arm for the teaching profession, partnering directly with state departments of education, school districts, teacher preparation programs, and community organizations. We are free, and also a one-stop shop for anyone interested in becoming a licensed educator. Our team at Teach can support anyone, no matter their background, in becoming a licensed educator. Specifically, this includes high school students that are considering the classroom, a college student that is yet to decide their major, or a career changer that's also interested in a new path. Our personalized support includes free one-on-one coaching and advising for current classroom educators who serves as like a licensure coach. Scholarships and fee reimbursements are also available. Educator preparation program and scholarship search tools, customized checklists, how-to guides, and email, text, and chat support as well as available. Currently, we offer personalized supports in Colorado, Connecticut, Dallas, Houston, Minnesota, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, San Antonio, and also South Carolina. And we try to encourage as many people as possible to enter this profession, um, through which way they see it, through which way there's a profound impact in their local community. Now I will tell you more about our moderator for our time together today, our very own Dr. Nuri Castro. Dr. Nuri Castro serves as Teach's Director of Program Development and Strategic Initiatives. She was raised in Durham, North Carolina by two immigrant parents and is a proud product of public and Title I schools. Throughout her academic and professional journey, Nuri has remained steadfast in her belief that education is a tool for freedom and social change. Her career spans multiple roles in higher education admin, public services, and nonprofit leadership, where she has developed and scaled transformative initiatives and programs. Nuri thrives at the intersection of strategic planning, outreach, and building data-driven systems that are people-centered and community-focused. and I would love for us to all welcome Nuri. I'll pass it along to my colleague Evelyn to introduce our guest speaker.
Thanks so much, Proudy, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're so happy to have you joining us from all across the United States. My name is Evelyn, and I serve as the Senior Partnership Manager for Teach New York, our New York-based teacher recruitment effort. I'm very excited to join you all from Rochester, New York, specifically in the Western New York region, so Rochester, and introduce you all to our special guest, Dr. John B. King Jr. Dr. John B. King served in President Barack Obama's cabinet as the 10th U.S. Secretary of Education. Over the course of his extensive and influential career in public education, he has been a high school social studies teacher, a middle school principal, the first African-American and Puerto Rican to serve as New York State Education Commissioner, a college professor, and the president and CEO of the Education Trust, a national education civil rights organization. Dr. King is currently the chancellor of the State University of New York, SUNY, the nation's largest comprehensive system of public higher education. Both of Dr. King's parents were career New York City public school educators. He now lives in Brooklyn, New York, with his wife, an education researcher and former teacher, and his 2 daughters. Welcome, Dr. King. We are so grateful, and what a joy to have you here. Nuri, take it away.
Thank you, Proudy and Evelyn, and thank you all for being here for this live portion of our event. And of course, thank you, Dr. King. So we're going to dive right in and we're going to get started and we're going to start this discussion. So, Dr. King, hijo de Adalinda King and John B. King Sr., we are so excited to have you here. And we're going to kick off our discussion with starting at home. And we're going to start in a similar place as your book. So your book opens up when your mother passed and you were begging to go to school. You talk about school being a sanctuary. And I'd love to hear more about what that was like. What was school for you as a sanctuary? Why did it feel safe? And I especially ask that you think about the aspiring teachers joining us today, the current teachers joining us today, and how they are or will be responsible for creating these sanctuaries and these spaces of safety and learning and love. Big question.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for moderating this conversation. And I so appreciate the mission of teach.org and excited to be here. So, I started the book there because school really played such an important role in my life. And it really started with the fact that both my parents, they spent their whole careers as educators. My mom was a teacher and then a school counselor, and my dad was a teacher, then principal and administrator. So school was always the topic of conversation at dinner in our house when I was very little. My mother was actually the school counselor in my elementary school when I was in kindergarten and first grade. And then when my mom passed, October of fourth grade, there's no words to describe how difficult that was. I mean, she'd been the center for me. My father was much older, and we hadn't really had that much of a relationship. I never remember playing catch with my dad, for example. He was in our house, but he was very distant. Yeah. And so when my mom passed, my dad told me, I wanted to be in school really for 2 reasons. One, it felt close to her because she had been the school counselor there, and school PS 276 in Canarsie was a place that we shared. But also I had this amazing teacher in fourth grade. He actually ended up looping with us and staying with us in fifth and sixth grade as well, Alan Osterweil, and he created this space, to the heart of your question, that was so safe and nurturing and positive and engaging. And in that moment of such fear and heartbreak and uncertainty and sadness, I wanted to be in Mr. Osterweil's classroom. Mm-hmm. And I remember his classroom like it was yesterday. We read the New York Times every day. We did productions of A Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare in elementary school. We did a production of Alice in Wonderland, where I was the rose in the garden with big red felt petals sticking out of my head, right? We took these amazing field trips, the Museum of Natural History, the Botanic Gardens, the ballet. And he just showed us this whole world beyond Canarsie, Brooklyn. He also was the kind of teacher who communicated such deep care for students, and he did that in a bunch of ways. I mean, when he was curious. He asked us questions about what we thought about the world. He wanted to know what we thought as 8, 9, 10-year-olds about the Cold War or about you know, famine in parts of Africa at that time. Like he was genuinely interested in what we thought. He also shared himself with us. I remember he would collect these amazing, elaborate shells with his wife on beaches around the world, and he would bring them into class and share them. And it was him sharing a little bit of his passions, of what he was interested in. So that space that he created, not only did I want to be there that day, but I have to say, without that space, I don't know that I'd be alive today. His classroom was so important during that period after my mom passed. My dad was struggling with Alzheimer's. Nobody knew. It was just the two of us. So home was incredibly scary and unstable. But Mr. Oswald created this space where I could be a kid when I couldn't be a kid at home.
Yeah, yeah. And it sounds to me like care and curiosity and giving a little bit of himself to you all and having that connection is what I'm
Mm-hmm.
hearing made
Mm-hmm.
the difference in that
Absolutely.
classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. You talk about this some in your book, and I'd love to hear you talk some about what was the point that you knew you wanted to pursue a career in education? And
Mm.
what were those experiences like? You were running a school in your early 20s, you've founded schools, you've created
Mhm. Mhm.
incredible student success models. Walk us through some of that journey and when you knew this was what you were supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of it traces back to that role that school played in my life. You know, as my father got more and more sick, I ended up having to figure out how to get food in our house, how to keep our household going. And school was the safe haven for me. Um, After my dad passed when I was 12, I moved around different family members, different schools, but it was always teachers who gave me a sense of hope and purpose. I struggled a lot as a teenager. I actually got kicked out of high school, first US
Mhm.
Secretary of Education, I've been kicked out of high school.
Mhm.
But it was teachers and a school counselor who gave me a second chance, who um, had more faith in me than I had in myself.
Mhm.
And because of that second chance that they gave me, you know, I got to college and went to Harvard, and a difficult transition in that I wasn't sure I could find my place, you know?
Mhm.
Um, because I'd been kicked out of high school, you know, I had to write 2 college essays. Most people just have to write the one essay. I had to write the second essay about, you know, why to get expelled from
Yeah.
school. And I had this sense freshman year, like, you know, is somebody gonna find that second essay? Did it like fall behind a desk and they're gonna realize they shouldn't have let me in, and
Mm.
they tap me on my shoulder and say, you know, you don't belong here. So I had this sense of imposter syndrome. I was struggling to find my place. And then I happened to go to a volunteer fair, and I was interested in government, political science. And at this volunteer fair, they said there was a program where you could teach civics as like an enrichment program in classrooms in Boston public schools. And so I thought, well, that, you know, I care about civics, I care about government, that'd be fun to do. So I started volunteering. And through volunteering, in those classrooms, I just loved working with students. And that grew into running a summer camp in a public housing development in Boston where we lived for the summer in the community, in the housing development, working with kids and families. and then running after school programs, and really public service became the center of my college experience. And I loved trying to do for other kids what teachers had done for me. And that's really what prompted the decision to become a teacher. It's what drives me now in my role as chancellor at SUNY. It's what drove me when I was Secretary of Education. What can I do to try to, in some small way, pay forward what Mr. Osterweil and other teachers did in my life?
Yeah. So much I could unpack there. But what I really want to highlight is the beginning of your answer, especially for folks who are thinking about teaching or who are teaching. I think so many of us growing up are parentified and have to hold such weight and such responsibilities that school is our break. And school is where we get to maybe not even fully be kids, right? But we get a break from life and just heavy things that we carry as young people. And so I really want to highlight that because I think it ties to how we opened up and it ties to your story so perfectly and how you have created you dedicated your career to creating spaces and nurturing educators who can be mindful of those things. And so that's something that really stood out to me that I wanted to highlight. And I'm also hearing this idea of lifting while you climb. You're giving back to this profession and to public service and to public education because of what it did for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think about when I was in seventh grade, um, my father was very sick and home was very scary and lonely.
Mhm.
I tell the story in the book of a night my father woke me up 2 in the morning, told me it was time to go to school.
Yeah.
And I remember being on the staircase in our house, clinging to the banister as my father pulled me on the stairs. And I'm saying to him, "No, Daddy, it's not time to go to school. It's not time to go to school." And and I didn't understand why was he saying it was time to go to school? What was happening? And he eventually just gave up, went back to sleep. I went back to sleep, and then I went to school the next day. Like,
Mhm.
that's what home was like, that level of um, kind of chaos and fear.
Mhm.
And I would sometimes sit in class in seventh grade thinking about, what was that night going to be like? Was my father okay? Was he safe during the day? Were we going to be safe in the evening? But I had this amazing seventh grade social studies teacher, Celestine Desazure, and her classroom, as you're saying, was this break. It was this space where I could think about something else. And I remember we did a project on the Aztecs, and we did an Aztec newscast. And so everybody had a role in the Aztec newscast, and I was the Aztec sportscaster. And for
Mhm.
that brief moment, the most important thing in the world to me was to be the best Aztec sportscaster there had ever been. And that
Yeah.
was such a gift that Miss D gave by creating that space. And so when I think about, the aspiring teachers, the current teachers who are on this call, like what a privilege to be able to create those spaces for kids, and what intentionality we need to have to say we can't necessarily control all the things that are happening in kids' lives outside of school, but we can make the classroom a magical place for young people.
Yeah. 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 And a healthy place that they can escape, right?
Mm-hmm,
A
mm-hmm,
healthy, a
mm-hmm.
place of learning, a place of care.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
joy. Yeah,
Of joy. Absolutely.
yeah.
So so many things I can relate to this. And reading your book, I saw so much of myself in it. And your answer here reminds me of something you said in the book. So on page 66, you wrote that it's easy as an adult to see that I was seriously depressed. But if any adult at Andover suspected as much, they never said or did anything. I simply didn't fit Andover's usual infrastructure of problem kids. So reading this just resonated with me so much. And I'd love to hear you talk about thinking about teachers and educators. How can they serve students at this margin? So they
Mm,
don't fit,
mm, mm.
they don't fit what we categorize, right, as a problem kid, or maybe that school or that district's version of a problem kid, but they are at a margin and they do need to be seen and cared for. What does that look like?
Part of the context for that um, part of the book. So after my dad passed, I went to live with my brother. My brother was 24 and I was 12,
Mhm,
and uh, it was a disaster.
mhm,
It came from a place of love that he took me in, but he was drinking and partying all the time and had no business having a 12-year-old, and it was a very unstable environment. And I had a friend who from Brooklyn who had gone to boarding school, and he told me about it. And I thought, okay, this is my way out of this situation. I'm going to try to get to a boarding school, and then, I'll have um, more stability.
mhm,
So I went to Andover, and what I felt there was very out of place. I was a kid from Brooklyn. There were not a lot of kids of color at the time. And it was an environment where I didn't feel affirmed in my identity.
yeah,
And I also didn't feel uh, fully a part of the community. And I'd basically been on my own since I was 8. And
mm,
so was not, uh, hadn't worked through so much of the anger that I felt, which so many young people who've been through trauma experience. And so I broke all the rules. I ignored all the rules. I got in a lot
mhm,
of trouble. And one of the things I observed is that the school had systems for if you were a wealthy
mhm,
uh, white kid who was, growing marijuana in your closet in your room, they had
mhm,
a system for how to keep that kid at school and how to have it all work out for that kid.
yeah,
But they did not have a system for a kid like me who was a student of color from the city, not in the right place socio-emotionally.
mhm,
And so when I think about that, I think part of our responsibility as educators is to try to figure out when a kid is struggling, whether they're struggling academically or they're struggling behaviorally, what's
mhm,
going on behind that?
yeah,
And then what's our strategy as a community of adults to respond to that? And it may not be the teacher alone. And this is why, I
mhm,
think school counselors are so important and school psychologists. And right, it's more than just on the teacher. But as a
sure,
community of adults, we should see that child who's struggling and we should try to figure out what is happening in their lives, what's in the way, because our kids are incredibly smart and talented and they all have immense potential.
yeah,
But there are things that get in the way. For me, it was a lot of anger that I
mhm,
had towards the things I'd been through as a kid. And I think we have to be very intentional about moving past just consequences. Yes, there have to be
mhm,
consequences and we need rules, all of that. But we have to take it a next step further and figure out, well, what are we doing to address the underlying struggles for the student?
mhm,
And this is very hard, especially in, some of our high need schools where you've got, 500 kids for every counselor,
mhm,
and teachers can feel overwhelmed
mhm,
by trying to address all of the struggles that students are having from a socio-emotional standpoint. So there's a policy element that we've got to work on, as well as the sort of classroom and school level work that we need to do.
for sure, yeah. Talk about a little bit about that intersection of policy in the classroom, right? What advice do you have for teachers, especially, to advocate for this or to connect with their administrators or to what does a teacher do in this case when systemic change, policy change, when it's
mm.
change that also has to be bigger than them, right? Because it
Yeah,
does take that community of folks.
yeah. It's there's kind of two levels, right? There's the sort of more immediate that you can influence, and then there's some of the bigger system level
Sure.
work. And I think we have to be committed to, testifying in the state legislature, showing up at the
Mm,
school board meeting, encouraging folks to run for school board, making sure that the superintendent understands the challenges and needs in the school building. So there's that policy level advocacy.
yeah.
But I also think at maybe a little closer to home, figuring out how can I be a force within our community of adults to focus our energy on student success. I think about when I was secretary, one of the programs we funded through the Investing in Innovation grants that President Obama created uh, was called BAR, Building Assets, Reducing Risk. And it was started by a school counselor in Minnesota who saw that in her school, low-income students, students of color, immigrant students were less likely to graduate. And so she said to her principal, what I want to do is have a team meeting where the teachers and counselors meet about students and figure out two things. One, for that student, what are they good at? What are they excited about? What are they passionate about? What are they strong in? So that we can leverage whatever that asset is to help the student feel engaged in school
Mhm.
and help them to thrive. And then second, we're going to figure out who's struggling, who needs intervention, and we're going to figure out which adult on this team is going to intervene with that child. And there were so many students who needed this kind of support that they did a randomized controlled trial. So they were able to say, well, we're going to take these students, they're going to get this intervention that we'll have the teachers, counselors meeting about them. And then there's these other students, they're not going to participate in that. And we're going to see how they do. And what they found was where the adults were meeting and planning, attendance was better, grades were better, graduation was better. And so they got funding to scale this program first at the district level and then across multiple districts. It's now a national program. And one of the things I love, their tagline is something like same teachers, same students, different results, right? Because it was about how do we organize ourselves as adults to try to get at the multiple needs that our students are bringing. So I think teachers have to be advocates on the policy level and on the community level as well.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, and I see some comments in the chat too that are kind of getting at capacity. And so I want to kind of pivot into another part of the book where I think is very related to everything you just said. So on page 87, you write, how do you connect without becoming emotionally entangled? When do you intervene? When do you just listen? And so, funny enough, I'm going to turn your own questions back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And what is your answer to those questions for teachers?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. I mean, part of why I shared those questions is because I think they're in a sense, eternal questions that you always struggle with, right?
Yeah.
Particularly when you're in a school, as I was for much of my classroom-focused career, um, in schools where there are so many students who are going through difficult things at home or in the community. And you're sort of always puzzling over, like, have I done enough? Can I do more? What else can I do? Uh, and it's very hard, and you carry the weight of it. I think about teachers today who are in schools with large numbers of immigrant students who are either undocumented or from mixed status families. It is a lot to carry
Yeah.
that fear that students are experiencing. One of the things I think a lot about, when a student is scared, what you want to tell them is it's going to be okay.
Mm.
And it's incredibly hard as the adult to be in a situation where you can't say
Yeah.
it's going to be okay, because you don't actually know if it's going to be okay. You can say, I care about you, I see you, I'm worried about you, I want you here, we love you here.
Mhm.
But it's very hard when you can't say it's going to be okay.
Mhm.
And so that's just an emotional thing that you sit with as an educator. And similarly, when you have a kid who's in a family situation where there's addiction, it's a difficult question. At what point would the child be better off not in the home?
Yeah.
At, knowing that our systems of support for kids who are taken out of the home are not very strong.
Mhm.
On the other hand, if you have a parent in the home who's struggling with addiction, it can be incredibly unsafe physically and emotionally. So
Mhm.
that's just a lot. And so you carry that and you ask this question like, there are obviously rules, mandated reporter rules. There are things you have to do, but there's this broader kind of deep question of uh, how do you make sure that you're intervening at the right moments? How do you stay healthy yourself? Because it's a
Mhm.
lot to carry those emotions. Who are you talking to? And one of the problems of so few school counselors is not only that there are too few counselors to talk to students, it means there are too few counselors to talk to teachers as well, because
Yeah.
there's a lot to process. So, I don't have the answers to those questions so much as I think they're questions that we all have to grapple with. And I think for new teachers, young teachers, it's really important to have a community of people that
Mhm.
you can talk through these things with,
Yeah.
mentors, colleagues, um, because they're hard questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think just as you said earlier, and as we all know, it takes a community to support our students, but I know it takes a community to sustain the educators as well,
Mhm,
especially
mhm.
with all that we are carrying and living through right now. So thank you for that. Um, we're going to pivot a little bit and talk about aspiring teachers and
Mm,
do some focusing on aspiring teachers. Um, so let's start with, how do we help more young people, particularly young people who look like you and me, to see teaching as a path to impact and to purpose?
mm. I mean, there's so much we need to do. One, one major obstacle is we have to make it more affordable to become a teacher.
Mm,
I really believe we should have a national program like the GI Bill, where you say, if you're willing to spend 5 years teaching in a high needs community or teaching in a high demand subject area, teachers of students with disabilities, um, bilingual teachers, that will pay for school. I think the
mm,
country should say we need teachers to go into this work. We're going to pay for school so that they don't have to think about school and the cost of school as an obstacle to becoming a teacher. I think that would have a big impact on teacher diversity. It would help more first gen students choose to become teachers, certainly more low income students, as well as students of color. So that's at a policy level.
mhm,
Uh, at maybe thinking about a district, some of the things we should do, it matters to have mentors, to be able to see um, other teachers of color, other first
mhm,
gen teachers, other teachers from low income backgrounds. And so building those kinds of communities. I think about Sharif El-Mekki,
mhm,
who leads this effort to support Black male educators in Philadelphia. It's incredible. And it's just
yeah,
so powerful to have um, Black male educators who are 30 years in, 20 years in, 15 years in, 10 years in, who are mentoring new and aspiring teachers. Really powerful. A second thing I think we need to do is make sure that the school communities are sending positive messages to young people about education. I worry. We have states that are trying to ban reading Toni Morrison, states that are trying to ban teaching the truth about our history, trying to, deny the difficult parts of our history. That's very dangerous because that sends a message to young people that school communities are not for them.
Yeah.
And that's going to make it very hard then to persuade that young person to become a teacher. Similarly, we still have places around the country that allow corporal punishment. That's crazy. That literally in schools this year, there were students who were beaten with a wooden object by an educator in their school. How do we then expect that young person to aspire to be a teacher, right? So those kinds of practices we have to get rid of so that school is a place of safety and support so that you want one day to become a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on this a little bit. We know that there's a lot happening right now around education. There's a lot happening in our country around public education, around teachers,
Mm,
around being a
mm,
teacher. What gives you hope for the future of teaching?
mm, mm. A few things. One is there are teachers saving lives every day in schools all across America. And I know sometimes I point out in the book that the hardest job I've had, and I've had a lot of complicated jobs, the hardest job I've ever had was first year teaching. It is really hard. You're doing everything for the first time. You don't have sort of files to go back to and lean on. It's very hard. And I think sometimes early in their careers, folks don't necessarily know the impact that they're having. But one of the things that makes me very hopeful about teaching and about education is I have seen firsthand that long-term impact. I was very proud to have Mr. Osterweiler, the teacher I was describing from PS 276. He was at my swearing in as secretary. He was the guest of honor at the swearing in. And to be able to say thank you to him for the difference he made for me. I think about when my dad passed uh, at the wake after my dad passed. A man came up to me, he's probably in his 50s, late 50s, came up to me to say he'd seen that my dad had passed. He saw the obituary. My dad had been his teacher decades, decades earlier. And he decided to come to the wake because he wanted to say to me what a big impact my dad had had in his life, how powerful it was for him to see a Black man as an educator in his school who had high expectations of him, who supported him. And that was such an important moment for me because I had, my father had been so sick when I was a kid, I hadn't really had a connection to his professional life. So that was a gift, but also as a powerful reminder of just the incredible impact that teachers have. That this man, decades later, just saw a thing in the newspaper and he wanted to be there because of that impact. And so, one of the things that makes me hopeful is I know that impact is there, and I just want young teachers, aspiring teachers, to realize they may not know it now, they may not see it now, but they are having this incredible impact. It's planting seeds, and those will grow over time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The lifelong impact is incredible. I recently connected with my principal from elementary school over 20
Mm-hmm.
years later, and it was a very similar reckoning to what you describe in the book and what you just talked about. I was able to tell her that at my dissertation defense, it was her who I thought about.
Uh-huh.
Right? And just how incredible that we carry. I mean, you carry your teachers with you. You talk about them in the
Yes.
book, you talk about them here, and that's a message that I really want folks to leave with, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought of that assistant principal like it was yesterday and I was in third grade, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And so it's incredible. It's truly incredible. So yes, thank you for that. So we're gonna start wrapping up our planned questions and open up a few minutes for our audience questions. But so two important questions I want to close with. So if every person, particularly the young people who are either listening right now or who will listen to this recording, walked away with one truth about public education, what do
Mm,
you want that one truth to be?
mm, mm, mm. Um, I would say that it is the best hope for the lives of individuals and for the health of our society. You know, it breaks my heart to see how public education is being attacked around the country. It breaks my heart to see folks who are saying we don't need a US education department because we don't need education to be a national imperative.
Mhm.
Uh, whether it is the ability to create a path in an individual's life, or we're thinking about how do we prepare the next generation of voters? How do we prepare the next generation of inventors? How do we prepare the folks who are going to find the cure to cancer or Alzheimer's? All of that goes back to public education and ensuring the strongest possible public education system.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is our last planned question.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm excited to hear your answer. So I will start a sentence and you will finish it.
Okay.
We need teachers now more than ever because.
Hmm. Because our children need them.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, it's that simple. Um,
Yeah.
you know, you think about where we are as a country, the the threats to our democracy.
Mhm.
You think about the fact that student performance is below where it was before COVID.
Mm.
You think about the crisis of chronic absenteeism that we have, so many kids missing so much school.
Mhm.
All of that. What do we do about that? Create great schools, support great teachers. Like public education is the way forward.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you. This wraps up our planned questions. And I promised at the beginning before we went live that I would not fangirl for too long. But I want you to have your flowers and to know that I appreciate all your service to the country, to public education. And as you know, you've touched so many lives, including lives that you maybe had no idea, like mine. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here today. On behalf of our guests and of teach.org, I will pose a couple of questions from our audience so that you can answer them, and then we will move into closing out the webinar.
Sure.
Uh,
Thank you.
so, yeah, um, a couple of our questions that were submitted for you. So one of our attendees said, I will be teaching second grade this fall, and I have zero teaching experience. What is your
Mm.
advice to me?
Hmm. Uh, two things. Uh, watch great teaching. I mean, there's no substitute for seeing great teachers. Now, if you can find classrooms to be in over this summer of great teachers, but also there's tons of great videos online of great teachers in their classrooms. But seeing what great teachers do, I think, is well, at least for me as an early career teacher, is hugely, hugely helpful. The second thing I would say is thinking about second grade. My wife taught kindergarten and first grade. Um, and and I bet every elementary school teacher on this call would agree. So much is about the routines that you create in that first month, 6 weeks of school. And so talking with really great teachers about how do they create those routines at the beginning of the school year is so important. Um, because that's when you set the habits. This is how we do things in this classroom. This is how we transition from math to reading. This is how we transition from this is how we put our our coats away in our cubbies, and how we transition to our desk for breakfast, whatever it is. Like getting those things right at the beginning of the year, so important. So sit down with some master teachers and get those routines prepared.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So our next question that was submitted, one of the folks who joined us is asking, or saying and asking, in a society where public institutions often fail to support the most vulnerable, how can the
Mm,
personal commitment of individual educators serve as a
mm,
model for systemic change? And is it fair to rely on personal heroism to fix structural inequity?
mm. Wow, I mean that's a powerful question. I mean the short answer is no. Like we shouldn't we shouldn't be so reliant on individual heroism um, to move us forward. And so, this is why I've spent the last the last few years of my career, focus on systems. Um, we got to get our systems right. I think about every spring, we have Teacher Appreciation Week, and a lot of Starbucks gift cards are given,
Mhm,
but we need more than Starbucks gift cards. We need
mhm,
people to vote like they love teachers.
mm,
We need people to show up at the school board meeting like they love teachers. We need people to demand of their elected officials that they invest in public education. And
mhm,
so, we ultimately we need, of course, uh, we want to celebrate the incredible individual contributions, but we need a societal movement to put schools and kids at the top of our collective bliss. There are cultures around the world where the question that you ask about how the society's doing is how are the children?
mhm, mhm.
And I think if we ask that question of ourselves in the United States today, the answer is worrisome. We have work to do.
Yeah, yeah. We all have a lot of work to do because I think we're all responsible for this.
Mm-hmm,
Absolutely.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
All right, Dr. King, now we are officially done.
Thank
So
you.
thank you again for everything. Seriously.
Thank you. This is a wonderful conversation. I so appreciate you, and I appreciate the values that are driving your career. So thank you.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to my colleague Jeremy, who's going to close out the webinar.
Yes.
Again, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for watching this recording whenever you watch this recording. And we hope to see you again at future teach.org events. Jeremy, you can take it away.
Yes, thank you, Nuri, and thank you, Dr. King, for your powerful conversation, your powerful story. I personally identify with losing a parent early and it being teachers who made the difference. And then I became a teacher myself. So thank you for sharing that. And also, again, thank you to all the participants for showing up and engaging with us in this event. On the screen, you'll see some ways to stay connected with us via social media, and it will also give you ways to navigate via the QR code to one-on-one coaching. A gentle reminder that if you live in Colorado, Connecticut, Dallas, Houston, Minnesota, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, San Antonio, and South Carolina, we have many resources available for you. Log on to your account to access scholarships, fee reimbursements, information on becoming a teacher, free advising in both Spanish and English, and more. If you're in a different state, we'll still do our best to support you in your journey to the classroom. So thank you all again for joining us. And as a final reminder, we highly encourage you to fill out this post-event survey before leaving your seat while your experience is fresh and your thoughts are top of mind. If this is the only way that you will be able to enter in for the chance to win a free ebook from Dr. King. So again, the survey is posted on the screen, and thank you all again for being with us today.